Hey friends, welcome back for more Reddit stories. Today we have a couple of ProRevenge stories for you to enjoy. So as usual, sit down, relax, and let's go. Evil cheerleaders get shown what evil truly is. So I was reminded of this when an old school buddy found me on Facebook the other day. Now, before I became a friendly cookie-loving teddy bear, I was a thin, mean little theater goth who got into frequent fights. It's what happens when you are black, nerdy, and gay while showing up in rural Virginia. I especially could not stand it when people pick on my friends. In comes the evil cheerleader. We'll call her Bea. Now, some of you might be rolling your eyes at this. Evil cheerleader? Oh no, what a terrible cliche. But our school was a little different. You see, she was the only evil cheerleader. The rest of the team was super nice and did a lot of inter-school outreach. Anyways, Bea liked to stomp through the hallways like she owned the place and would viciously bully anyone who looked at her wrong. Naturally, my confrontational ass would stare at her like she was a bug every time I saw her. Up to that point, she had only beef with me. We traded insults, she started a rumor about me, I would pour soda on her hair, that sort of thing. Then she saw me with one of my shy theater friends, who we will call Kai. I was more than Bea's match, so instead she chose to go after Kai. Kai was such a wonderful human, never said a bad word about anyone, was always willing to help people, and she made the best s'more cookies. Kai also had the unfortunate habit of just letting people treat her however they wanted and not saying anything about it. So imagine my sheer fury when I see Bea slamming Kai against the locker by her hair, calling her the N-word. You wanna try to bully me? Fine. You wanna call me outside my name? Fine. What you will not do is come after my friends with racism and violence. Not today, baby girl. I immediately ran over and slapped Bea as hard as I could. Now, due to my height and ethnicity, I've been taught that I shouldn't start physical altercations with women as it never looks good. I cared just enough to not deck that cunt. As Bea was picking her face off the floor, she thought it would be a good idea to double down the racism. Bea, all your are wife beaters. Me, come again? I slapped you because you were hurting my friend. The hell is wrong with you? Bea, she stole something from me like the dirty monkey she is. Me, again, what the hell is wrong with you? Her insults really weren't making sense. Looking back, I think she was just trying to say the most racially offensive thing she could think of without any real consideration of reality, which is just terrible roasting technique. Me, you know what? I have less than 0 fucks to give you right now. You come near my friends again and I will literally snatch your uterus out with my bare hands. Bea, we'll see what my boyfriend says about that. Me, oh no, not your boyfriend. Sarcasm. She walked away spitting more bullshit, but at that point, I chose to ignore her and focus on Kai, who had a small knot forming on her forehead. I took Kai to the nurse office and begged her to report Bea. Kai didn't want to because I might get in trouble too. I told her that I didn't care, slapping that bitch was worth it. But Kai didn't budge. After Kai got an ice pack, we were both sent back to class and the rest of the day went on as usual. After school, I was on my way to anime club. Yes, I'm a weeb. And who would show up but Bea's boyfriend, who we will call Bob. Now, Bob was a soft-spoken guy who only got cool points because he was on the football team. Peel off the football team's luster and you have a walking, talking doormat who's about as intimidating as a medicated cotton ball. So him and his boys waltz on up to me, spitting some wannabe threatening line about making me disappear. I informed him that I own waterfront property on the Wish Island because I wish a bitch would. His friends laughed at him, which exasperated the snot out of me. Most punks are all talk. You stand your ground and they will back off. Unless they have their friends with them. The moment they lose face in front of their crew, they become much more likely to do something stupid, so of course he rushes me. Now I've got something of a conundrum. I'm scrappy, but I'm by no means a badass. There are 5 of them and 1 of me. So if I can drop this dude, I have to be able to either put on a good show so they don't engage or run. Considering I was extra AF, I decided to put on a show. I used Bob's momentum and I slammed him into a nearby locker, putting my forearm on his throat. Now I don't remember what threat I whispered to Bob, but I am going to assume it was effective because he went still. Now what I do remember was what happened next. Now due to how I was holding him against the locker, our bodies were pretty close. Too close. Because I felt something press against my thigh. Now I'm thinking it's a weapon or a phone or something. Nope, it was his erection. Homeboy was aroused. Why? No clue. All I do know was that things has gotten really awkward. I let him go and hightailed out of there because I'm equal parts what the fuck. And did that really just happen? During anime club, I told Guy about what happened. She laughed because of course she did. But then a look crept in her eye. It was this devious little smirk that I had never seen up till that point. She looked at me and told me that if we wanted to, we could use this to teach Bea a lesson. I'm thinking she meant like a rumor or using this to insult her, but no. Kai had something far worse in mind. It's true what they say about the quiet ones. So after a few days and some additional planning, it was time to put our revenge into motion. I found Bob and asked to speak with him privately, so we went into the spare classroom that school never really uses. After some back and forth, Bob confirmed that he was bisexual. Some cringe-worthy flirting later, Bob and I are making out. All according to plan. Bea would walk in, seize us, and be humiliated. Now I do want to mention that hindsight is 2020. We were teenagers and we really didn't understand how problematic this plan was on a social scale. Bea deserved some karmic justice, but this really shouldn't have been it. That being said, Bob was an eager beaver. He didn't stop at just making out. He went down south, if you catch my meaning. Me being hormonal and admitted starved for a little attention, really didn't see any reason to stop him. So when Guy led Bea into the room, she got to see Bob's head, well, bobbing, and me with a contented smile on my face. Now to Bea's credit, she was not homophobic towards Bob in any way. In that highly problematic situation, she had plenty of opportunity. She was however furious at him cheating on her with one of her sworn enemies. And an N-word to boot. She screamed at him for almost 50 minutes before a teacher had come by and demanded that we head to class. Later, Bea found me at lunch and called a ceasefire of sorts. She agreed to only target me if I agreed to stay away from Bob. I agreed, knowing full well that Bob was coming over to my house that afternoon. Bea and I would continue to antagonize each other until I moved away, but it was never as severe. In some ways, I think we kind of broke her confidence a little. Oh well, don't be a racist cunt and people won't get back at you. Lay off a third of the team and expect us to work harder? We will see about that. So this happened sometime in the 2010s, somewhere in the UK. That's all I'm revealing. I worked for a medium-sized PLC in a small team that worked with the sales department getting quotes. I had previously worked in another team and a different department in the same company as well. So to set the scene, the company had recently had some issues with regulators, and senior management were either oblivious to the damage they were doing or didn't care. They were trying to save costs but going about it all the wrong way. So my team consists of 6 team members and a manager. We were fairly busy and often helped out on other teams as well, and they would in turn help us. This is important for later. So we are all called into a meeting without warning and told that due to declining work tickets, they were laying 2 of us off. They did say 2 people were safe, the manager and his sidekick. They made us reapply for our jobs, including doing a test, following the letter of a law of redundancy, which had nothing to do with our roles. It also became apparent during the process that the company flat out lied or at the very minimum manipulated data used to come up with their conclusion of falling ticket numbers. They dropped by 13 from year 1 to year 3. Bear in mind it was a total of several thousand tickets a year. In the end, the company carried on and 2 team members were removed and made redundant. One of whom took a golden handshake, the other sued the company for various things. Not really worth mentioning here, and won. After the dust settled, it also became apparent manager secured his sidekick position despite him being the worst member of the team in terms of work done and work quality. So in the weeks after, the entire team were too busy to help other teams, who then stopped helping us. So a huge backlog of tickets also built up. We also got threatened with disciplinary proceedings if our backlog didn't come down. but was also refused any overtime. During the process, we had also been admonished for skipping steps in getting quotes, steps that often took a significant amount of time and served no purpose. So me and 2 others remaining, not including Sidekick who had his nose so far up manager's rear-ended, came out of his mouth. Not including Sidekick who had his nose so far up manager's rear-ended in came out of his mouth. Decided to do everything by the book, down to every last bullet point. This made the backlog of work even worse, but they couldn't say anything. One week we had another meeting with HR, the sales director and our manager to discuss the issues. We all calmly said we are sorry, but we have to follow the guidelines and rules laid down, and this is as fast as we can work. We were also asked to start helping out the other teams again, as we should be team players. Again, we said we are sorry, but we can't, our workload is too high, and it's also not in our contracts that we have to do other teams' work. This went on for several months and management still refused to believe we were overworked. When it was time for holidays, we realized they hadn't changed the amount of people allowed off from free. So we all booked holidays, they both went abroad and I decided to visit family the other end of the UK. Of course, when manager realized a week before, he went nuts and another meeting with HR was called. We all calmly said, sorry, but we checked the rules for our team and 3 people out of 4, manager could do what he likes, can be off at any one time. And again stood our ground and all went on leave for 2 weeks each. This caused even more chaos at work as you can imagine. The sales director after this hatched a plan to get the Indian teams, we had offices in India and other offshore places, to be trained up by us and to help us. However, they demanded we fly out to spend weeks there training them. Again, we all refused as it's not in our contracts to be trainers or to have to work abroad. They ignored the fact I didn't have a passport at this point, so poor old manager and his sidekick traveled out and trained them for weeks. Eventually both stayed for over 2 months and failed to train them. We would send low effort tickets to them and they would screw it up and we simply said, sorry to fix this, we need to do it again. So after 6 months they gave that idea up entirely. After around a year or so of this, I'm being deliberately vague on timing, so please don't ask about it. We all decided to all seek other employment, having found we all could not trust the company or manager anymore. And we all found roles elsewhere within a week of each other, so all handed our 4 weeks notice. Again to the letter of our employment contracts and were due to all leave on the same day. Now, the female member of the team who was a very learned person and she revealed in all of our contracts any documentation we create is ours and we can do with how we wish when we leave. So we hatched a plan. In the final week we are there, we move all our digital stuff to one location, including all my manuals and cheat sheets for my previous team. They both did the same with their previous positions within the company. On our final day, we bring in our own external drives and with IT's help, download and removed all documentations and deleted the copies on the company's systems. We all said our goodbyes and at the end of the day, quite happily told our managers what we had done. He exploded and demanded it back and we calmly tell him not according to the letter of our contracts. This, waving the drives at him, is ours and we choose to remove it with us. We were later told by friends who remained that the sales director had a fit because no one was doing quotes for him. Gladly, we all have had great new places and keep in touch. Mess with minors at my job, lose your job and your boyfriend. Alright, around 2014 I worked for a large movie theater chain in a small Midwestern city. Job was pretty awesome outside of the shit pay and essentially no way to move up. I like to think I'm pretty good at my job and I try my hardest no matter where I work. In this particular situation, I was one of the most tenured employees at the theater, save for 2 other folks who had worked there part-time on the side and had full-time jobs elsewhere. For the sake of this story, I need to tell you about Jane, not actual name. Jane started working for the theater 2 months before me. They worked elsewhere as a supervisor and was looking to move up at the theater. Right after I started, one of the managers left to work at a different theater and the supervisor moved up. We had 2 managers, 1 general manager, basically the highest level at the theater, and a supervisor, which is a manager in training. This is important. Jane somehow got the supervisor position even though there was another person who essentially was promised the position due to their continued service at the theater for almost 8 years. There were rumors about Jane sleeping with the general manager when she started, and this situation got them going again. I didn't care too much because why would I? I'm but a lonely pawn in a corporate machine. Anyways, Jane moved up and the tenured crew member left the company because they got screwed over. Once Jane moved up, we had a whole meeting about her moving up and how the theater focuses on professionalism and ensuring no favoritism was happening. Specifically referencing how normal crew members should not fraternize outside of work with management. Jane didn't really listen to that though. She continued to hang out with crew members who were mostly underage and would do various things like go drinking with minors, taking them to bars and buying them drinks, or simply buying alcohol at the store and letting them drink at her house. I honestly have no issues with the drinking at home deal, just adding context, as well as smoke weed with them and post pictures on Instagram. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Jane had a secret Instagram where they would post pictures of themselves with their friends from the theater. They chose Instagram because none of their family or their boyfriend used Instagram and no one would know, right? Even more damning was her relationship with a 19-year-old that worked at the theater. She had a boyfriend who had been with her for years and honestly supported her for all intents and purposes. Not only did she have a 19-year-old side piece, but also was messing around with a 17-year-old. I even caught them messing around in the break room one time. She essentially threatened me with my job if I told anyone. Honestly, she could have just told me to please be quiet and I would have just judged her silently. Fast forward about a year or so and another one of the managers left for a new job. Jane obviously moved up and someone else took the supervised position. Now, I won't go into too much detail, but despite my tenure and performance, I was looked over for the promotion. A newer crew member who was really good friends with Jane got the position over me. This was confirmed by the other manager who let me know that Jane was definitely in good with the general manager who ultimately made the final decision. That being said, I was beginning to soar and making minimum wage for years at a job that couldn't give a shit about my efforts and continued performance. That being said, I was preparing for an exit. Before I get into my exit, it is important to note that Jane had and most likely still has a problem with me. I've talked about some issues I had with her, but I never escalated or even confronted her about anything she did to me up to this point. I honestly left it be, but I didn't like her, and the fact I didn't like her or play along with her bullshit infuriated her. So much to the point where she made my life hell at the theater. When she was a supervisor, she didn't have much power, but when she became manager, she began giving me shit shifts, convincing people that I was weird and to avoid me. I mean, I'm weird, but not like avoid me weird. Threatening me physically, threatening my job. Her and her gang of misfits assholes also slashed my tires. I have no solid proof, but my car was parked in the employee lot, and you know only employees can get in. Beyond that, she also made fun of my girlfriend, my now wife, for having an invisible illness, MS. She would make her life hell because she had a disability and had some minor limitations. Add together all of this, plus my girlfriend went off to college, plus getting looked over for the promotion, suffice it to say I found a new job. I had a few close friends at the theater, including my now wife, who I met while working there. Silver lining, right? I had let a few of them know about my new job, but told them to keep it on the DL since it was still 2 weeks away. I had put my 2 weeks in with the general manager and asked that he also keep it on the DL since Jane and her posse would fuck with me. I told him that I want to tell everyone myself, so it kept him quiet. Now, the important thing about my new job is that it's essentially paid me double my wages from the theater. All of my friends were stoked for me. I was taking a job that would also have me making more than the managers at the theater, but also a job that put me on a better track in life. That being said, with Jane and I butting heads on multiple occasions and her track record of messing with me, she decided to get one last attack on me. She started a rumor that I was just going to call out on all of my shifts the 2 weeks before my new job started. With her last act of revenge in motion, the general manager approached me and let me know that he wouldn't be scheduling me the last 2 weeks. I tried to explain to him that rumors were bullshit, that I needed to work because it would be my only source of income. I told him that Jane started the rumor and I started to tell him all of the other stuff as well. He of course didn't believe me and told me that Jane wouldn't do what I was saying she would do, so it was her words versus mine. I contacted my new job, who let me know that my start date was firm and that their budget wouldn't allow me to start until 2 weeks later as originally planned. Now here I am, essentially jobless for 2 weeks. Now I was upset, but I was also lucky. I was still living with my family and didn't have to pay rent, so I sucked it up and essentially told myself that I would just take a forced 2-week vacation. But Jane didn't stop there. She escalated again by having one of her cronies call my new job and tell them that I got fired. I was luckily able to talk down my new boss by letting him know that this wasn't the case, that I put my 2 weeks in and everything else, but that was the last straw. I left my last day at the theater, and while it was sad and I was upset that I wouldn't be able to work out the last 2 weeks of my job that I had for years, I was focused and determined on revenge. Rule number 1 of living a secret life and having a secret Instagram is not add everybody and their mother to the page. I had a friend of a friend who also didn't care for Jane. Let's call him Joe. Joe and I had gone to high school together and briefly worked at the theater together. He and Jane were part of the same group at the theater until they had a small falling out. Nothing crazy, but he wasn't exactly happy with her. I talked to Joe and we discussed my issues with Jane over some lunch that I bought for him. Food is key to all revenge plots. Once we ate and discussed my problems with Jane, I asked for his help. I needed access to her Instagram. You know, the secret one. Showing her hangout with underage employees, drinking alcohol and smoking weed with them, and also some mushy posts about her 19-year-old boyfriend, as well as some moderately racy photos with her 17-year-old fling. With very little discussion, he gave me full access. I took screenshots of essentially everything. We are talking 2-3 years worth of illicit and moderately illegal activity. More than enough to get her fired and to raise some questions in a relationship. I took the screenshots and I printed them on the most high quality paper material that CVS had to offer. I also copied them to a few flash drives for good measure. I purchased 2 yellow padded envelopes, can never be too safe, and filled them both with copies of all of the posts, as well as flash drive with additional copies. As well, I included a note in each one for the appropriate parties. One of the envelopes was taped to the back door of the theater. There was somewhat of a blind spot, so pulled into the parking lot from the rear and snuck around the corner Mission Impossible style to tape the envelope to the back door. One, it was the general manager's name, as well in the letter I merely state that one of their managers had a secret Instagram with a lot of damning evidence of not only favoritism, but also fraternizing with underage employees, amongst other wrongdoings. In the letter, I also requested her immediate termination, or the information would be provided to the district manager as well as our corporate office. I made sure to put it somewhere the general manager would see on his morning sweep when he opened the theater. The second folder and letter was delivered to her home by Joe. Joe agreed to this as I knew Jane's schedule and had a good idea of when she would be gone, and he knew where she lived from previous hangouts. With both folders delivered, it was only a matter of time. Before I knew it, I was receiving death threats from Jane's gang. All of them saying that they knew it was me and that Jane was going to come after me. That she never did anything to deserve this. It didn't matter to me, of course. I no longer worked there and would hopefully never have to deal with them again. From what I heard, she was taken into the main office of the theater and the general manager let her have it. He ultimately had to fire her because there was very clear proof that she was in direct violation of many of the rules and conditions of her employment, as well her boyfriend, with proof in hand, kicked her out of his home. Last I heard, she moved further north and hasn't held down a solid job since. Her family didn't want much to do with her once everything came out with cheating on her boyfriend. Also, the part about fooling around with a 17-year-old tends not to sit well. In the end, I started my new job without fail and moved on from that place. Haven't seen much of anyone from there since. So those were some epic revenge stories. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it and let me know what kind of stories you would like to hear from me. I hope you have a nice day and I will see you in the next one.